So today we are going to be talking about the books that I read in the first half of January. Hello, it's Editing Mel here. Just wanted to jump in and quickly apologise for the quality of the sound today. There's a lot of background sort of rustling noises. Two reasons for that. One is I think it was the position I put my mic in, so it kept rubbing up against my clothes, and the other one was that I was filming in the same space that Rowan was working in, so there's typing noise in the background. Normally I would just refilm, but I want to get this up for tomorrow, so it's mid-month, so yeah. Sorry about that. So as you may recall from my Roll of Reads game, I had to read 10 books in the month of January and I was feeling quite trepidatious about this. I don't normally read 10 books in a month, but luckily it is school holidays. So I was feeling quietly optimistic, and yeah, it's halfway through the month and I have managed to read 5 books, so I'm halfway there, which I'm extremely excited about. So I'm going to talk you through the books that I read for the first half of this month, and then I'm going to do my end of the month wrap up at the end of the month. For those of you that aren't aware, I decided that I was going to do a mid-month and an end of the month wrap up rather than do one big long monthly wrap up at the end of each month, because I do have a tendency to ramble on a little bit, and apparently rather than curbing my rambling, I decided to have 2 lots of rambling, so there you go. What I've also decided is that I will actually leave all of the stats and that sort of information until the end of the month, but I can still tell you what my ratings were for each of these books. Again, for those of you that don't know, I am using Corpile, which is a rating system that was created by G over at Books Roast. I will link her channel in the description below if you want to go and check her out, just in general, but also if you want to find out more about Corpile. So this is a rating system that I find works really well for me. You set it up so that it gives you a rating out of 10, but then it also gives you a rating out of 5. This month so far has been amazing for reading. I have had nothing that I've rated below 4.5 stars, so that's pretty fantastic. So let's just dive straight into the books, shall we? None of you will be even remotely surprised that my first book that I want to show you is Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. I did do a full devoted vlog to this one. It's very spoilery, so if you haven't read the book, maybe don't go and have a look at it, but I will link it in the description below. So if you want to know my fuller thoughts and my genuine reactions as they come up, go check out the vlog. I loved this book. I thought it was just fantastic. Definitely 5 stars for me. For Corpile I got a 9.6, so very nearly completely top of the barrel. It would definitely be in my top books of 2020. Yeah, so what did I like about this? Everything. At the beginning of the book, I did worry a little bit that it was going to be a little bit info dumpy, but it didn't stay info dumpy for very long. I really don't know how people who write this kind of epic, sprawling fantasy manage to be not info dumpy even just a little bit, and it certainly picked up and I certainly stopped worrying about it. So yeah, for the most part I found the world building was really intricately linked into the storyline, into the character development and into the plot development, so that was really good. So in fact all of the developments of those aspects of the story were interwoven in a really nice way that really flowed well together. Our 2 main characters are Bryce and Hunt. So Bryce is a half fae and Hunt is a fallen angel, and they live in Crescent City, or Lunathon, I think it's called. And yeah, I really liked both of those characters. I really loved Bryce. I thought she was sassy and she definitely was not afraid to say what she felt. She was very intelligent and she was very good at standing up for herself. She was very good at calling people out when they were being misogynistic or just kind of ridiculous. And this is a very tough world, so she definitely needed to be very tough, especially given that she's half fae, half human, and humans in this world are not very well liked. But yeah, as we develop more of the storyline and we discover more about Bryce, we start to discover that she actually has got some deep-seated issues and trauma and things that are kind of making her more prickly and more sassy, and that's her defense mechanism. But it's also part of her character, and I really like the way that even as she starts to soften, even as she starts to deal with some of the things that have happened in her life to form some of those behaviours, she's still very sassy, she's still very sure of herself, she's still very sarcastic. It still remains part of her personality even as she starts to soften, so I thought that was really well done. I really liked Hunt's character as well. Not quite as much as Bryce, but I did think his characterization was done really well as well, and we get the same thing again. We get a real sense of what he has gone through and what has sort of created the person that he is, and some of the decisions that he makes throughout the book that are a little bit stupid. You definitely understand where he's coming from, even if you don't agree with his decisions. So I thought that was really well done. One of the things that I absolutely loved about this book that I've never seen anywhere else was the way that Sarah J. Maas was able to weave technology into a story that very definitely was fantasy based and was supernatural based. So we have werewolves, we have vampires, we have fairies, we have angels, we have demons, we have sorcerers, we have all sorts of different supernatural creatures, and at the same time they still watch TV, they still use mobile phones, they still send each other text messages, they still watch YouTube, and I thought that was really interesting, the way that she wove those together, and it's done in a really natural way. Like, it didn't feel like the technology was shoved in there to try and make it feel, to try and get us to feel like we understood. It just felt like, yeah, well, sure, just because they have magic and they're supernatural creatures doesn't mean that they wouldn't develop the technology that we've developed, and that was really interesting. She still wove the magic aspect of things into it, and some of the ways that the magic worked in conjunction with the technology was really interesting, and that's not something, like I said, that I've ever come across before, so I was really intrigued by that, and I thought she did it really, really well. I don't believe that any of her other books have anything like that in there. I think that's unique to Crescent City, but anyway, it just was great. I also really liked, this is a story that is part urban fantasy, part sci-fi, part high fantasy even, but it's also a murder mystery, and I thought that all of those different parts of the story and the world were linked together really well and really effectively. So yeah, it's definitely something that I'm really glad that I read. I really, really enjoyed it. It's quite a big book, as you can see. It's 800 and something pages long. It's just shy of 800 pages long, but I got through it super quickly. The first little bit, probably the first half, I read at a probably relatively normal pace, but then I couldn't stop reading it, and the last 150 pages I just couldn't stop reading. I stayed up pretty late one night trying to finish it, and yeah, it was just, everything kept happening. It was just moving, the pace was moving along so quickly, it kept speeding up, and there kept being so many new things to find out and new things to be shocked about, and it was just, yeah, it was amazing. The pace was incredible, and it didn't feel like, it felt like it all fitted together really well. Sometimes you feel like with stories that ramp up the new information and the new shocking thing and the new bit of storyline, it feels like it's kind of jammed in there just to make it feel exciting. It didn't feel like that at all. It was all made sense. It all harked back to something we'd already found out about. It all answered questions, but it's set up in such a way that it can still obviously continue on as a series, which I thought was really interesting and really well done. The other thing that I did find, although this is still definitely a 5-star read, it's definitely going to be one of my favourite books of the year, but the other thing that I did find that, I mean, it's not a big deal, but the end bit where the villain explains how he had done it all felt a little bit like, you know, those scenes in the movie where the villain thinks he's got away with it, so he's just telling you exposition about what he actually did. It felt a little bit like that, so that could have been done a bit differently, but because we had already had so many red herrings and already assumed so many different things that had happened, and then we found out that was wrong, and then something else we thought would happen, and then we found out that was wrong. It kind of was okay that he was filling in the blanks of how it actually happened. So yeah, it wasn't a big enough deal to make me not give it 5 stars or anything like that. It's just a little thing that happened that not my favourite thing about movies or books that people do sometimes, but I will forgive it in this particular instance because this book is amazing and I absolutely love it, and I'm super excited to read some more Sarah J. Maas. The next book that I read was Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. I really liked this book as well. I gave it an 8.6 on Corpile, which is 4.5 stars. The main reason why I didn't give this 5 stars is I think that it was somewhat overhyped for me. So I've been hearing about this book, well, it feels like years, for ages now, and how amazing it is. It was on so many people's top books of 2020. It was on quite a few people's top books of 2019, and I definitely understand why, but I think it just was a little bit overhyped for me. It just didn't quite live up to it. So as far as I know, Talia Hibbert is an Own Voices author. So the main character, Chloe Brown, lives with a chronic illness, which is fibromyalgia. I'm not 100% sure whether Talia Hibbert actually specifically lives with fibromyalgia herself, or whether she lives with another type of chronic illness, but I have heard that she is an Own Voices, so she lives with a chronic illness. So I believe that her representation of how that affected Chloe's health and therefore her lifestyle was accurate. How it affected her mental health was also accurate from what I understand, and that felt really genuine to me, and felt really realistic as well as to the characterization of Chloe and how her mental health and her life and her general outlook had been affected by her chronic illness, but not just her chronic illness, by the people in her life and their reactions to her chronic illness as well. So that was really interesting, and that helped us to explore more of Chloe's character, explore more about what Chloe wanted, what the whole Get a Life thing was all about. Yes, so this book is about a youngish woman called Chloe Brown, who, as I said, lives with a chronic illness, and she lives at home. She doesn't really get out much, and she doesn't kind of feel like she has a life. One day she has a near-death experience, and she decides that because of that she would get a life, and she writes herself a bucket list of things that she should do to help herself get a life. One of the things, and the first thing she does, is move out of home, and this is where she meets Red, who is the superintendent of the building in which she is renting. They really don't get along when they first meet, but at some point they have an incident that kind of makes a bit of a connection between them, and she decides that he's probably a good person to enlist to help her get a life. And so that's what the book is about. I liked Red's character as well, like the way his character was written. I really liked the way Chloe's character was written. Like I said, I really enjoyed, you can probably tell from the little cartoon on the front there, that Chloe is, a bigger woman. She's not a skinny mini. I really like the way that in the book at no point does Talia Hibbert kind of talk about Red liking Chloe because despite her size, or even making reference to what she looks like as being a size. She does describe how Red's attraction to Chloe, but it's always about her curves. It's always put in terms that are very praising of what she looks like, and nothing that would imply that, well, he likes her even though she's a bigger woman or whatever. So I thought that was really well done. I thought that was a really good example of body positivity, which I really appreciate, especially as a not exactly skinny person myself. So yeah, that was something I really enjoyed. And another thing that I thought was really interesting was that Red has also got some issues in his life that he's overcoming. And one of the things is that he is a domestic abuse survivor, but he's a domestic abuse survivor from a woman. So that was really interesting because that's not something that you see very often whenever that's portrayed most of the time in books or movies or TV shows. It is a woman who has been the victim of domestic abuse rather than the man, and I just thought that was a really interesting way of looking at it, and it kind of reframed the concept of abuse a little bit, which I thought was really good. It is quite smutty, and that was done well, I think. I'm not a huge reader of smut, so it's a little hard for me to tell, to be honest, because like I said, I'm not a huge reader of it, so it's a little hard for me to know what's well written and what's not in comparison. Rowan is laughing at the way I said smut. Smut. What was I talking about? Smut, basically. Yeah, so because I'm not a huge reader of smut, it's difficult for me to know what's well written and what's not. And I thought it was well written. I quite enjoyed it. I'm trying to think of how to say that the smut is the reason why I dropped the half a star. Okay. But it's not because it wasn't well done or I didn't enjoy it, or even that I don't like smut or that I don't like romance. But there was so much time given to the smut that it took, like, I didn't feel like it. I thought it was good, but overdone. Like, there was so much time given to the smut that I could have had more story. Yeah. I could just say that. Take two. So yeah, it's not that I don't like the smut, it's just that I felt like maybe there could have been less in it and it would have had more storyline, or maybe they could have had a bigger book so that so she could encompass as much smut but more storyline, is what I felt about this one. But I did really, really enjoy it, and I still gave it 4.5 stars. So I will also say that this was actually very smutty, but I felt quite differently about the smut in this, probably because this one's a chunk and it definitely was not more smutty than story. So there's going to be probably a lot of people out there who are going to very much disagree with me about this book. So I will say again, I still gave it 4.5 stars. I really, really enjoyed this book. That's just a little thing that I thought. Moving on. The next book that I read was Hollow Pop. I've grabbed the wrong book. I'm going to put this down and go and get the other book. Apparently not. I'm fine. So I bet you're all very glad that you tuned in to this extremely professional video. Anyway, what I read next was actually Hollowpox by Jessica Townsend. This is the third book in the Nevermore series, hence why I accidentally grabbed Nevermore. It was amazing. I gave this one a 9 out of 10 for core pile, and that is a 5-star read. So I think I've given all of these books 5 stars, if not 4.5. They're just beautiful. They're just really well written. They're fun, they're whimsical, they're sweet, but you know, there's still a bad guy, there's still a problem that needs to be overcome, but it's just, overall, I'd say that it's just fun and sweet and whimsical. So I don't want to go into too much detail about this book in particular because, like I said, it's the third in a series, but we follow Morrigan, and she has been swooped off to Nevermore, which is another world that's sort of adjacent to her world, and she has become a resident of the Deucalion Hotel, and her patron Jupiter North has put her forward to be a member of the Wondrous Society. So this is her second year in the Wondrous Society, and she is faced with some new things that she has to overcome, and faced with some new things going on in Nevermore which are somewhat mysterious and confusing. It's just a really fun middle grade fantasy romp of a book, and I highly recommend it. If you like that sort of book, I definitely think that you will like this one. Then I read The Dry, which I read on audiobook, so the image will be here, by Jane Harper. So this is a book that I actually had already seen the movie for, and we're doing the book as part of my book into movie club, so I wanted to read the book, and it's amazing. I really, really, really enjoyed it. I gave this one a 9, which gives it a 5-star as well. So as you can see, I'm doing really, really well with the first couple of weeks of the year, and I'm hoping that this will mean that my rest of 2021 will be just as amazing. But anyway, so in The Dry we follow Aaron Falk, and he is a investigator in the federal police. He works in a white-collar financial crime, and he goes back to his hometown, which is a small country town in basically the outback of Australia, because his childhood best friend has died and has been accused, or it's assumed that he killed his wife and son and himself. And so Aaron goes back for the funeral, but then he ends up getting embroiled in finding out what happened, and maybe there's more to the story than what it looks like on the face of it. And so because he used to be a state police, he used to work in that kind of crime investigation, and also because it used to be his hometown and his best friend, he stays to help out. But throughout the story, we also find out that there was another death when Aaron was a teenager that actually potentially may have involved Aaron and his best friend Luke. So you're kind of flipping backwards and forwards between the past and the present, but it's done really, really well. I generally tend to like that kind of way of writing anyway. I like the switching backwards and forwards between past and present. That's a trope that I enjoy, and this one's done incredibly well, and you can barely even tell when you are switching, except that it becomes clear because of the characters that are in that particular section. I mean, the book can't suffer because of a movie, so I knew what was going to happen, but when I saw the movie, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what was going to happen with the present mystery. I kind of guessed what potentially happened, or at least why the death of the young girl when Aaron was a teenager happened, but I don't think I guessed exactly what happened or exactly how it happened, but I guessed what was going on. But it was done really, really well, and I really enjoyed it. It was incredibly well written. Jane Harper is now an author that I'm excited to read more of as well, so I will keep an eye out for her books in the future. And then finally, the last book that I read in the first half of this month was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This was quite a different book than I was expecting. I was expecting this to be a little bit more similar to Get a Life, Chloe Brown, in terms of it being a contemporary chick lit type of book, or maybe something a little bit more akin to The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary. I'll say it was similar to Big Little Lies by Leanne Moriarty, except that it really wasn't. In terms of the fact that there's a underlying domestic mystery that you are uncovering and discovering more about throughout the novel, in that terms it was similar to Big Little Lies by Leanne Moriarty, but I think that this is more literary fiction than it is contemporary chick lit, just in the way that it is written. So it's very meandering. You go backwards and forwards again between past and present. You swap points of view quite frequently, and in fact you swap points of view in midway through a paragraph sometimes, which is very unusual and not something that you're technically supposed to do according to all of the writing advice, but I really enjoyed it. I thought Celeste Ng did an amazing job. She managed to make that particular writing choice work really well in this story. You'll be going along reading the book and it will be talking about what's happening in the town and what's happening with this particular overarching storyline, and it'll then tell you about something that happened because of Mia, one of the main characters, and then it will suddenly take a deep dive into Mia and her backstory and her history, and yeah, and it did that quite a lot. So it would just be plodding along, oh yeah, and then she went here and then she went there, and then you have a deep dive in someone else's backstory. Sometimes not even the main characters, sometimes it was just one of the supporting characters. I found this really, really intriguing, and not least of all because it feels like it took a lot of the advice that you're given about writing and ignored it and did exactly what they tell you not to do, and did it really, really, really well. So I was really intrigued and really impressed by that. I found that I didn't want to stop reading it. I read most of the book yesterday in one go. I didn't finish it until this morning, but I had about not even 100 pages left to finish this morning, so it took me about an hour to finish this morning, or maybe a bit longer. Yeah, so definitely really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely very, very intrigued to read. I think she has one other book out, Everything I Never Told You, so I definitely want to read that, and I would be very intrigued to see what else Celeste Ng has in store for us. Those are the 5 books that I've read in the first half of January, which is amazing. I read 5 books in the first half of January. Sometimes I don't read 5 books in a month, so I'm pretty impressed with that one. Anyway, guys, what about you? what have you been reading in the first half of January? Have you had a really great reading month so far like I have? Comment below and let me know. I would love to chat with you more about that. If you got this far and you want to leave me an emoji, that would be really fantastic. Leave me one of the little cat smiley faces to let me know you were here. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said, I really hope you enjoyed this incredibly random, rambly video. I apologise for just how rambly and random I was today. That's slightly more than usual. But if you've stuck around for this long, I assume you haven't minded too much. Anyway, I will talk to you next time. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up, to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you later.